Not a whole lot doing in Marvel Comics this week, but All New Venom did come out. And unlike a lot of Al Ewing's run up to this point, where it just got wildly convoluted and complicated, spacefaring adventures and the multiverse and all that kind of stuff, we're kind of back to basics, which I dig. Because a question on everybody's mind is, who is the new Venom? So what this does here is this picks up arguably in the aftermath of like the whole gang war event. We don't need to go into that. And we pick up with Madame Masque being put on trial. Now, here's the thing about this, right? Like Al Ewing kind of plays it fast and loose, and it's like, calling them suspects and different things like that, because by the end of this, he's going to give us 4 options, and the options are actually really, really dope. And so Madame Masque being here is just a result of, her involvement with gang war and the fact that she's kind of always on the hunt for, gang territory and committing crimes and yada, yada, yada. Madame Masque has never been like a significant villain in Marvel Comics. She's always been a relatively small-time person, and that's one of the things you're going to realize when it comes to like these 4 options that are given to us regarding who the Venom symbiote is basically being warned by, right? It's like small-time guys, or relatively small-time guys. And so you do have a little bit of back and forth between like the prosecutor and Madame Masque's attorney, that the whole thing's being broadcast live on TV, and it's actually being watched by Luke Cage and Robbie Robertson. Of course, Luke Cage is the mayor of New York. Now, the cool thing about that, and I'm sure for some of you guys, you may not remember that happened, or you may not even know that it happened at all. And to kind of sidetrack from the comic for a second, add a little meat and potatoes to the context here, a lot of you guys remember the story Secret Empire, where Captain America became a villain and then like took over North America, essentially. There was a part of that story where the city of New York was encased in dark force energy. In effect, it was literally locked away in like another dimension, and it was coated in darkness. And so nobody would have been able to see anything had it not been for Dagger from the Cloak and Dagger team, who just constantly emitted light in the city. Well, one of the things that came out of that was that the Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, became mayor after helping the citizens navigate all the turmoil and keeping crime to a minimum and different things like that. Well, that goes into Devil's Reign, where he tries to outlaw superheroes. And so Luke Cage runs against him as mayor, and Luke Cage wins. And that's kind of how you bring an end to the Devil's Reign event. It was very much a political story, but it was a phenomenal story. And so Luke Cage has basically been mayor ever since. And it's kind of cool, right? Like, the role suits him, to be honest, right? I wouldn't want to piss off that mayor. But Robbie Robertson, as most of you guys know, right, was like the assistant editor to J. Jonah Jameson at the Daily Bugle and a longtime friend to Peter Parker in Marvel Comics. And one of the things they kind of talk about here, right, a little bit of discussion back and forth, is some of their history and the things that kind of bonded them or brought them together. But they also have ideological differences, because Luke Cage is like, are we really like televising federal trials now? And Robbie Robertson's just kind of like, I mean, look, here's the thing, man, right? It brings closure to families and so on and so forth. And Luke Cage is like, it's all about bread and circuses, man. It's putting on a show for the world to see and yada, yada, yada. So clearly they don't necessarily view the same thing. Enter suspect number 4, the 4th potential person who is the one that's wearing the Venom symbiote. And I would argue the most likely person, Rick Jones. Now, here's the thing about this, right? Like Rick Jones, I love Rick Jones as a character because this guy has done it all. This guy's been a sidekick to Captain America. Like literally, there was one point in Marvel Comics when Rick Jones took on the mantle of Bucky Barnes and is like Captain America's sidekick. It didn't last very long, and Captain America was like, oh no, Bucky, don't talk to me about Bucky. And like ultimately Rick Jones had to vacate the role. But like he was really, I'd say like the 2 biggest roles he had in Marvel Comics was number 1, being like a really close friend and ally to the Incredible Hulk at a time in Marvel Comics where the Incredible Hulk had no real friends or allies. And so kind of following the story of Rick Jones in the Incredible Hulk comics was almost kind of like us as a stand-in in Marvel Comics for just kind of experiencing what life was like with the Incredible Hulk. But the other most notable moment for Rick Jones was like teaming up with Marvel, Captain Marvel. And he just kind of like bounced back and forth. He was really with the Incredible Hulk, I think, more so than anybody else. And it kind of made sense, right? Like Rick Jones was the guy who was standing where the gamma bomb was supposed to go off, and like Bruce Banner pushed him out of the way in the old school comics, and that's what led to Banner being exposed to gamma radiation when the bomb went off in the first place, and all those little things. But again, I say all that to say, Rick Jones has really played the field in Marvel Comics and has really been all over the place in Marvel Comics. Also, hell's bells, the guy's wearing a Marvel Comics shirt, which happens from time to time in Marvel. I think Rick Jones was also A-bomb too. I also forget about that. Everybody forgets about that because it doesn't really matter. Now, here's the thing, right? This, of course, needs to be a story that has stakes. So in the middle of all of this, what ends up happening is they bring in a guy who used to work for Advanced Idea Mechanics, and is a guy who's kind of a genius when it comes to like body language, right? Basically analyzing it, studying it, and being able to pick up on who's who. Because ideally, an Advanced Idea Mechanics is part of quote unquote the honeycomb, I think is what they called it, that everybody wore the exact same suit. So they were kind of like stormtroopers, right? Like you would never know who was actually under the mask. But for this guy, there were little tells that each individual person had because they were just functioning as their normal selves with a giant suit on. And so what he was able to do was differentiate between who was doing what, who each individual was, and while he didn't necessarily know what their names were or anything like that because that information wasn't given, that when he's brought here and the question is like, this girl, Madame Masque, right? Was she part of Advanced Idea Mechanics? Did she get involved in all these little things and so on and so forth? That the response to this guy is like, yeah, it's basically her, right? Now that part's not overly important. Madame Masque's trial doesn't really matter all that much. What does matter here is that once he positively identifies her as the person who was at one point the leader of Advanced Idea Mechanics, seemingly before her arrest, he says, this farce of a trial is no longer necessary. We have human and electronic confirmation, sir. Translocate on my signal. And this guy, right, Andrew Forson shows up as the leader of Advanced Idea Mechanics. Now, here's the thing. I love the way Al Ewing does this because it's kind of Al Ewing at this point just having fun, right? After having written this great, big, huge, expansive Venom comic and then clearly being forced by Marvel to wrap it up quick, fast, and in a hurry, that now he kind of just gets to have a little bit of fun here, right? And so, like, when Andrew Forson shows up, he's like, greetings, rabble. I am Andrew Forson, AIM's one true leader. It's the most like just cliche villain of the week statement ever. And I love it. It's amazing. But like this dude shows up here, right? And he's just kind of like, here's the thing. I am about to make a complete example of this whole thing. One, the nonsensical natures of your trials and how little control you actually have over anything. And two, the fact that anybody who abuses the capabilities of Advanced Idea Mechanics, it's someone to be dealt with swiftly and harshly. And so this guy kind of means business. Now at that point, Rick Jones grabs Robbie Robertson at the direction of Luke Cage and takes off out of there, right? Now, there are a couple instances where, like, clearly, Rick Jones' experience in the superhero community comes to bear. For example, like, Andrew Forson starts to materialize in front of them as they're running to the door. And Robbie Robertson's whole thing is, like, he's materializing in front of us, right? And that's where Rick Jones is like, he's materializing. He is not materialized. Let's go, right? So like, it's just that kind of small differentiation with Rick Jones' experience where he knows like he's not actually here yet. He's still intangible. We still have time to escape. We're not gonna be like, oh my God, he's appearing in front of us. Well, we better stop and just not keep running. Right, so I love that. Now, this is where Al Ewing kind of starts to play this game of like, who's Venom? Because at this point, they split. And it's Rick Jones' idea. He was like, now we split up, right? He can't chase us both. Find a cop, find a phone, find something. And that's where Robbie Robertson is like, sure, like, I'll find something, I'll find a thing, it's kind of cool. Like, I love the way this like whole fun little experience goes. And so after that, like, it's kind of like, should we chase after him? And it's like, nope, because Luke Cage shows up and Luke Cage goes to attack Andrew Forson. And then at that point, Luke Cage is just like blasted out of the building. Then Forson goes to try to find Madame Masque, obviously to punish her for misusing Advanced Idea Mechanics resources and whatnot. And then it turns out that like Madame Masque is gone. And then Venom shows up right now. Venom looks cool. And again, I love the way this is done because there's no references to Venom War. There's no references to the grandiose nature of like the King in Black or anything along those lines. It's just classic Venom, which now that everything's over, I'm kind of excited to get back to, right? Venom showing up and just giving somebody the business. And so literally he just like starts trashing this guy. Like, that's really all it is, right? Venom just absolutely starts pummeling this guy. Now, what's also kind of cool here is that we get these clues to the idea of the fact that, like, the symbiote is bonded to a person. But we also get a couple clues here and there about who Venom actually is. Because one of the things that goes on is like when one of the other guys for Advanced Idea Mechanics is like, it's a symbiote, right? Kill it. The response to Venom, kill them. We're not an it. We're not a monster. We are Venom, right? Don't wear it out. Now, that's going to be an on-standing thing of Venom referring to himself as we a lot more than he did before. One, because Marvel's given the Venom symbiote a lot more personality than it used to have. And two, because again, as most of you guys know, Marvel Comics copies the movies. The movies don't really copy Marvel Comics anymore. So it's kind of the inverse of the way things used to be. And so with that in mind, Andrew Forson makes this comment about how this is Eddie Brock, or at least calls him Eddie Brock. Now, again, after the events of King in Black, Eddie Brock is bonded to Carnage. We don't need to go into all the complexity of all that kind of stuff. We're keeping it simple and fun in this video, man. Enjoying the simplicity while it lasts, because it is Al Ewing. And so one of the things this guy comments on is like, that's not Eddie Brock. And one of the things that's cool here is he says, I'm a specialist in superhuman body language. I know every Venom's fighting style. Both Eddie Brock and his son, Matt Gargan the Scorpion, who had the symbiote at one point in time, Lee Price, all these guys, if any of them were in that suit, I would know and advise you accordingly. But I'm telling you now, whoever is piloting that symbiote has never been seen in it before. Now, that right there is right off the bat Al Ewing just being like, this is not a repeat of anybody who's had it before, which is kind of cool because my initial guess was Matt Gargan, right? Matt Gargan as Venom was really awesome. During Dark Reign, that was a great time for the Venom stories, right? Like it was really, really cool. And it does kind of suck that Matt Gargan's not back as Venom, but it's still, it's cool. I'm not complaining or anything. But analyzing the body language, right? This guy says, a little Spider-Man in the mix there, that's true of all Venoms, but it does throw me off. Even so, I could swear I've seen whoever's inside that symbiote, and recently too. I've been in custody since the gang war. I suppose the only time I could have seen anyone was in jail, or at the trial, or in this room. It could have been anybody that he's seen recently. But here's the thing, right? It has to be somebody who was fighting, because Venom fighting and this guy analyzing his body language, he's picking up all the little moves and all that little stuff. But again, there's also the little quips that come along with it. And that's why I love the choices that Al Ewing has given us and the nature of this character, because once you start to break it down, right? Like Luke Cage clearly could be Venom. I mean, just the look of Luke Cage's attire prior to this and the look of Venom now, it matches. Robbie Robertson is ex-military, right? So like at one point in time, he was in the military, so he was trained how to fight. You've got like Rick Jones, who loves making quips and making little jokes and little things like that. And so it's like Venom is kind of a combination of all of them. And one of the other things that Venom does too is he makes a comment about judo, right? About like how he knows judo and taking out every single one of these guys from Advanced Idea Mechanics. Now, we also know from like Rick Jones' time in really training with Captain America that he knows judo. So like each and every one of these characters could potentially be Venom if you know enough about their histories and you know what they're capable of. Now, of course, ultimately, the Advanced Idea Mechanics guys are defeated, right? And they just end up teleporting away, and just kind of a display of Venom's power. And then Venom leaves. Right when Venom leaves, Luke Cage, Rick Jones, and Robbie Robertson all come back. And so they're just kind of like, okay, now I love this, right? Because it turns into the Spider-Man meme where they're all just like pointing at each other, right? Like, it's you're the one who's it. I love this because they all go out into the hallway and they're like, okay, so the Venom symbiote shows up when each one of us are gone, but we all left at the same time and we all split up. So none of us know what the other person was doing. And Madame Masque has disappeared as well, right? She's gone. So it's like, I mean, it could very well have been Madame Masque, but like none of us really know what was going on here. Now, this is fun because now it turns into a mystery, right? Like, who is the new Venom? And like, I'm digging it. I want to know your comments. Like, I want to know your thoughts down in the comment section, like who you think the new Venom is. But then we get one final player in all of this, right? Dylan Brock, the son of Eddie Brock. Because what you do with a kind of epilogue is you pick up with Mary Jane Watson and Paul Rabin, whatever his last name is. Now, here's the thing behind all this, right? It's not superly complicated, and honestly, it's not even really overly important. Paul Rabin is not from this universe. There was actually a story where Mary Jane Watson and Peter Parker actually ended up in an alternate reality when Mary Jane Watson became, or at least part of the time, when she became the superhero Jackpot. it's okay. She's like the second version of Jackpot, technically, in Marvel Comics. The original died. Some girl named, I think it was like Anna or Ariel or something along those. It's been a while. It's been like a decade and a half or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. But in any event, Paul Rabin and Mary Jane Watson, in the time when they were in this other universe, actually raised kids together. Now, technically, they were Paul's kids, but like they were together as a couple and almost kind of had a small family. Eventually, their kids like disappeared from reality and all that kind of stuff, and the wound is still fresh. And there's a whole history there, right? The reason why I say all of that is because at the time that they are here, they're met by the arrival of Dylan Brock, who's been here for a little while. Now, of course, Dylan being a teenager is also popping off at the mouth, right? Like he literally basically says that like Paul Rabin is an idiot, even though Paul Rabin is a genius level intellect. That when Mary Jane comes in, Dylan's just like, oh my God, finally somebody useful, get in here, right? I mean, look, here's the thing, man. Back when I was coming up, my parents didn't take lip. You start mouthing off like that, man, you're gonna find yourself at the business end of a belt. You know what I mean? Like, this child clearly needs some discipline, right? Like, help him understand that he is a child, right? Just literally start, just take that belt right to those hind parts. I promise you, right? He's gonna get himself cleaned up quick, fast, and in a hurry. But for real and for true here, right? One of the things that he does is he's been analyzing everything that was going on in the courthouse, like all the people who were there. And while Dylan is not a genius level intellect, he is smart enough to be able to pick up the pieces and to say, okay, there are 4 candidates for who this new Venom is. It's Rick Jones, it is Luke Cage, Robbie Robertson, and Madame Masque. One of these guys is wearing my symbiote, and I'm not gonna stop until I get my symbiote back. So it's really cool, right? I'm excited to see where this goes, to be honest with you guys, man. Like, this is the exact story we needed coming out of Venom War. Something just back to basics, simple, down to earth, and fun to follow. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Let me know what you think down in the comments section, and I will catch you all later. Peace.